Hey peeps! Oh my gosh, it's so gorgeous out today. It's supposed to get up to 77 here in New England, and we are very, very excited about this. Of course, when I say we, I mean the royal we. No, we're really stoked about how beautiful it is outside. And I've been thinking a lot about this kind of, looking back at old decks, rose-colored glasses, walking down memory lane with some older decks, and really feeling this beautiful reminiscent energy of my earlier years as a reader, and some of those pivotal decks that really made the channel what it is. And so I thought that I would do a further down the path video for the Mystical Shaman Oracle by Alberto Villoldo, Colette Baron-Reed, and Marcella Lobos. And of course, Jenna DeGrotalia did the artwork for this deck. Recently, I think it was sometime mid-March, I really felt a call to pull this deck out of vacation mode. And I hadn't felt called to work with it in a little while, so I was kind of surprised that it was the voice I was hearing, because I was teaching the Tarot of Vampires workshop and feeling very, very connected, of course, to the darker themed decks, as I usually do. But this deck really kept bothering me, and I kept getting the image of Jaguar. Let's see if I can find it. It's one of my favorite depictions of Jaguar as a spirit animal. I do work with Jaguar energy in my practice. I was gifted Jaguar's presence through a very pivotal training for me back in my mid-20s. And this depiction of Jaguar has always been one of the most accurate depictions for me of how I experience Jaguar energy when it shows up to walk alongside me. So this image kept popping into my head. And I'm someone that meditates and journeys a lot before I go to sleep at night, and it kept popping into my head whenever I would lay down to meditate with my deity. And I knew, I was like, okay, I hear you guys. I'm gonna pull Mystical Shaman Oracle out and I'm gonna start working with it. But it was very clear that the deck wanted to be worked with personally for me, and not as much to be a deck that would be popping out for client readings at the moment. Now, of course, I say that, and tomorrow the deck could decide to get chatty with client readings. But I've really been working with this deck personally for myself in my morning draws in the morning. I'm just going to show you some of the artwork here. I will put the link to my original videos with this deck in the description box down below, as always. So I've been working with this deck very, very personally, very intimately in my morning draws, with my morning journaling. And as always, this deck gives very poignant, spot on daily draws. And what I love, and sometimes need to take a step away from with this deck, is that it's always really, really spot on. And I really love the guidebook with this deck, and I do encourage you to use reversals, even if you don't normally. I do not normally use reversals, but I do with this deck, and I consult the guidebook when I have that reversal show up, because the medicine portion of the guidebook meaning, which is for the reversals, is really, really powerful. Like, it really forces you to look at parts of yourself, or ways that you're interacting with a situation, or a perspective that you're choosing. It really kind of calls you out on that and brings clarity to that. So I do strongly recommend, first of all, working with this deck for personal practice, using the guidebook. I've been using this deck since I was living in Portland when I bought this deck. So 2017. And I still use the guidebook regularly. I journal with the guidebook prompt. They don't have journal prompts, but I journal off of the guidebook meanings. And this deck is really, really on point. And it kind of forces you to look at all the parts of yourself and what you're bringing to the table in an experience or in your life in a way that's really necessary, but not always easy. So this deck, much like any type of shamanic work that you do, it's not hearts and rainbows. I think you guys know at this point, I'm not a hearts and rainbows reader or a hearts and rainbows witch. And so when you work with this deck, it's going to show you the whole picture. And yes, your current perspective has value and matters, but it's also going to show you the other side of the coin and ask you to pause and to look and to connect with the elements, with the medicine wheel. I would say, of course, with the grandmothers, in order to deepen into your alignment with your inner compass. And so this is a beautiful medicine deck. And it's also an empowering deck though, because the upright meanings do point to, you know, finding your way, tapping into an earth-based practice to assist you in finding your way, in feeling connected to spirit, in feeling connected to the divinity that is within you, and understanding the ancestral lineage that you also carry and that you are helping to heal through your full presence to your practice. So I have to say this may be my favorite Colette Baron Reid deck of all time. This is like the one that if you said you can only have one Colette Baron Reid deck, it would be this deck. Never mind the fact that I fucking love the artwork in this deck. Jenna, I think this is Jenna's best deck that she's ever done, at least of the ones that I've seen. And I really feel like this was like the perfect storm of nailing how shamanic practice feels and a shamanic path feels for me as someone who does work with the wheel and walks the wheel daily. This deck really resonates for me with that shamanic aspect of my path. And so when people ask me, you know, what's a shamanic deck I could work with, this deck is the deck that I recommend. I love the artwork in this deck. And this deck is a very multi-purpose deck as well. The Mystical Shaman Oracle can be just for, you know, one card draws, personal draws. It works very well as a clarifier in a tarot spread. And you can also do a lot of spiritual themed or personal journey themed spreads with this deck very easily with just this deck. So it lends itself well to all forms of card practice. And so you're going to get your money's worth most certainly out of the deck if you feel called to the artwork in the deck. I do think this is a deck where if you don't enjoy the artwork, you're not going to get as much out of working with the deck as if you enjoy it. Now, while I did say rereading the guidebook repeatedly and working with it in daily draws is an amazing thing, and I wholeheartedly believe that, the artwork in this deck is so evocative for me that I don't need the guidebook when I work with it in spreads for clients or when I'm working with a larger spread for myself. So I do think this is a deck where you want to make sure that you enjoy the artwork and that you get something intuitively out of the artwork when you're going to be working with it in a multiple card spread situation. And I do feel that this deck lends itself well to that. When I first had this deck way back in the day, I did daily draws with this deck almost every day for nearly a year with my partner at the time. We both were really, really connected to the deck, and we worked with it a lot together. We did daily draws together every day and kind of discussed and broke down the daily draw and how we felt it would apply for our separate days, and then our ending our days together as a couple when you come home and spend time together in that way. And when my son was with us, because at that point I had shared custody with my ex-husband for my partner and I at that time, we would all draw together. And so we included Vincent in those draws for my half of the week back then when I had Vincent. So I have really, really personal memories with this deck, very, very beautiful memories of sharing this deck with two people that I loved the most in all of the world. And so I have a lot of love in this deck. And when I separated from that partner, I did continue to work with this deck as a means of healing my broken heart, understanding part of, those karmic threads when you weave them and unweave them. And so this deck has a lot of that beautiful energy of endings and beginnings and sharing and vulnerability and love within it. And I think it's a deck that works across the board beautifully for any type of question that you might come to the deck wanting an understanding of, if not an answer as well. This deck is a divinatory deck. I feel it can be used divinatorily very easily. It lends itself well to that practice, and it does like tarot. I find that the Mystical Shaman Oracle works really well with the Line Strider Tarot. It does like Tarot of Vampires. I like to do daily draws from each. That's what I'm doing currently. That's what I've been doing for the last almost month now. And it's pretty sweet. This deck also likes Serpent Fire, I have found. You guys know I'm visual, so I'm looking at my tarot decks. I know. Oh, I did use it with my teacher's OG Rider-Waite-Smith because she was my shamanic teacher, and I felt like this deck held a lot of Levity's lineage, especially in regards to the medicine wheel and the grandmothers of the medicine wheel. Let's see. What else do I have tarot-wise? Oh, you know what else? Darkwood Tarot likes this deck. Last year I used this with Darkwood a fair amount in client readings, and I really enjoyed that marriage. So I think this deck plays well with a lot of different artwork styles. I'm actually excited to work with this one with that new Any Means Necessary Sean Koss Tarot. I think they're gonna work really well together. So I'm super stoked for that. But I love this deck. I think over the years, it's no longer a daily deck for me, but it is a seasonal deck. Spring, summer, fall, this deck always kind of circles around. It's usually a little bit later in the spring, I feel, than this year, but I do understand why this deck came forward and would not leave me alone for me to pull it out of vacation mode and get it back in with the working roster of decks. I kind of think that this deck is like a Scotch neat on the rocks. That's what this deck is. It's meant to be savored. And I kind of think, because I have this deck on my altar downstairs now, I feel like this deck talks to my other decks too. And it's like, hey, what's going on over there? I have it next to the Fairies Oracle by Brian Froud right now on my altar. And I feel like they're kind of like, yo, how's it going? What'd she talk to you about today? Ah, cool. What kind of readings did you do? I feel like it's a very chatty deck with the other decks. So I think this is, at least in 2023, my favorite Colette Baron Reid deck that I've ever worked with. It's very, very powerful. Like I said, though, it's not an all the time deck for me because sometimes, much like Deviant Moon, which I also did another video on this week, it's too to the point and sharp for me. Sometimes I need a little aftercare, and this deck does not give aftercare. It does tell you the truth though, and it is an empowering deck. So if you have this deck in your collection, when you feel drawn to pulling it out and working with it, I say give her a go again, bring her out, hang out with her. enjoy her energy, enjoy her power, especially if it's springtime for you now where you are. This is a really great deck for that kind of burgeoning, awakening energy, that creative flow. It's a really beautiful deck for that. And if you're on the fence about purchasing it, this is one that I would say go ahead and pull the trigger. I do think that this is a deck that's worth purchasing, and it's a worthy addiction. Well, I guess deck collecting is an addiction. It's a worthy addition to your collection. It's a deck that won't just sit on the shelf, at least in my opinion, but that's going to get used and worked with, and that you're going to find value in over the years. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. It was wonderful to hang out with you on a nice, warm, sunny day here in New England. I am sending you all, as always, much love and many blessings. I'll see you in the next video.